From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, live from chilly New York. It's like in the teens in the Northeast, and not a good time to travel up to this part of the country, or if you live here, whew, God bless your heart. It is freezing. So with that being said, packed show for all of y'all today. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get this ball rolling. Join me for a coffee cup cheers this morning. Well, I'll fix my voice. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. All right, so we have a lot to talk about. We'll start off with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. So we talked about this last week on the show. And at the time, HPE was like, well, we're not really sure. And that's always the case whenever this happens. But Intel Broker, who's a known threat actor on cybercrime forums, typically, and I'd say more times than not, when Intel Broker does post something on cybercrime forums, it tends to be true. That is the case here, where allegedly he put out, he or she, we don't know who Intel Broker is, allegedly included source code for products like Zerto and ILO, a private GitHub repo, digital certificates, Docker builds, and even some PII that the attacker described as old user PII for deliveries. They're also offering access to some service used by HPE, including APIs, WePay, GitHub, and GitLab. HPE said it's aware of the breach claim. It's conducting its own investigations. However, at this time, they're not sure that they can look at the claims and confirm them to be true or untrue. And there's nothing more stressful for a cybersecurity team than the situation the HPE team is in right now. Nothing more stressful. If you're a cybersecurity practitioner, you've been on your fair end of cybersecurity events, and that's part of the job. That's why we do what we do. We sign up to security knowing we're going to be dealing with stressful events. And that is the case here, folks. The case here is that the HPE team is now going through logs. They're trying to use every tool at their disposal to identify whether this data is real data or whether it's fake data, one. Number two, how old is the data? If the data is real, how old is that data? And then how did they get that data? Was it a potential compromised user account that they were able to get it? Do we have a backdoor planted somewhere within our infrastructure that allowed for this data to come out? Now, the one thing about Intel Broker, if you look at their modus operandi, they are what I'd call are likely kind of the mouthpiece of a very notorious and very infamous initial access broker, meaning someone gets in, downloads the information, hands it off to Intel Broker, who posts it online potentially, and then negotiates the sale rights to it kind of under that name, because that name has, kind of credibility. So people will pay more. So there's a premium to Intel Broker posting it. And again, you got to understand the world of decentralized crime to understand that just because person A said, I have it, doesn't mean that person A actually got it. Likely person A received it from some source or another. And that's really important to understand in the world of cybersecurity, because oftentimes we try to point the finger at one single person. That's not the case here. With more data breach news, hotel management platform Hotelier suffered a data breach after threat actors were able to get access to their S3 cloud storage on AWS to steal millions of guest PII and reservations for well-known hotel brands like Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt. The breach occurred back in July of 2024, and they had continued access to the environment until about October. The threat actors claim to have stolen nearly 8 terabytes worth of data from their S3 bucket. Hotelier confirmed the compromise and said they're communicating with impacted customers about the breach here. The investigation determined that unauthorized access was terminated in order to help prevent a similar incident from occurring in the future. They've disabled the involved accounts and continue to work to enhance their cyber security protocols. Again, very interesting to the fact that this platform is being used by all of these major brands The Hotelier was previously known as My Digital Office. It's a cloud-based hotel management solution. It's used by about 10,000 hotels worldwide to manage reservations, transactions, nightly reports, as well as invoicing. The threat actors behind the Hotelier breach told Bleeping Computer they initially attacked the company's Alt Asian servers using an employee login. Those credentials were stolen through an info-stealing malware. Again, take a look at initial access, compromising an employee with that employee credentials being able to get into the server, meaning they didn't have MFA. It's really simple because the attack would have stopped right then and there had they had MFA. Have MFA, they get the MFA prompt, they can't get the MFA prompt. Now you start to generate logs of a whole bunch of attempted logins. MFA, the employee would likely maybe get a text or an email saying you're trying to log in, you've been logged out, whatever the case may be. I mean, really, cybersecurity is at the basics, blocking and tackling. If you're into football and you watch the Eagles-Rams game, that Eagles offensive line, that is some good blocking and tackling right there, right? There were opening running lanes so wide you felt like you were on a highway in Texas. The same thing applies in cybersecurity. You got to do your good basic blocking and tackling. You couldn't name a person on that offensive line, right? But you know who the running back is, you know who the quarterback is for the Philadelphia Eagles. The same applies in cyber. MFA, it's an offensive lineman. It's not sexy. No one knows who it is, but it really does prevent. And a good MFA, a good implementation of MFA. There's a book by Roger Crimes around MFA that I urge anyone looking at how to properly deploy MFA to read. You look at how do you deploy MFA. You don't want to deploy text MFA. You want to deploy app-based MFA. You want to deploy authentication-based MFA, so forth. And then how you manage MFA and the rules and policies you set forth within your MFA all really matter. MFA, multi-factor authentication, just in case we have some. I know our audience varies. A lot of cybersecurity practitioners, but if you're a first-time listener, MFA means multi-factor authentication. That's that code you would enter in that you would typically get on your phone. SMS, not a very good way to do it. If you can do it through an app, that's ideal because that's physical and so forth. So there's that aspect there. So they didn't have MFA. Then they were able to get in. And from there, they were able to gain access to their S3 bucket, meaning they moved within the network laterally. And then once they got into the network, they were able to download and export data at a pace of 8 terabytes without anyone raising a damn finger to say anything about it. So, yeah. They say Troy Hunt told Bleeping Computer he received an extensive set of data with reservation tables containing 39 million rows and users table with 212 million, meaning this is going to be very significant. So we'll see what happens there. We'll move to Ukraine and Russia, where the war is still ongoing, folks. That war has not stopped, and the cyber warfare there hasn't eased at all, with Russia and Ukraine trading blows like a heavyweight boxing match. Ukraine did restore service to their state registrar after a disruptive Russian cyber attack carried out by the Russian military intelligence units. In a statement on Monday, the Ukrainian Ministry of Justice, that was responsible for managing around 60 state databases, confirmed that the critical registers are now operational. Apparently, this wasn't the type of wiper malware. This more likely, either if it was or wasn't, I'll say this. It doesn't say whether it was wiper malware or not. Obviously, they were able to restore everything, meaning they either was wiper malware, they were able to rebuild everything, and they had hot storage, that they were a hot backup that they were able to get everything out of. The attack disrupted the electronic registrations of birth, marriages, and death, forcing the agencies to process these manually on paper. Real estate transactions, including purchase sale agreements, leases, gift transfers, and mortgage contracts, were also put on hold during the cyber attack. And again, Russia is looking at this and you go, what's the interest there? Economic disruption, right? The disruption in the people losing faith in their government. It's part of what warfare is all about. So Russia utilizing that as well. We move on to an uncovered security vulnerability in multiple tunneling protocols that would allow attackers to perform a wide range of attacks. So this is coming from Top 10 VPN in a study saying that internet hosts that accept tunneling packets without verifying the sender's identity can be hijacked to perform anonymous attacks and provide access to their networks. As many as 4.2 million hosts were found susceptible to the attacks, including VPN servers, ISP home routers, core internet routers, and mobile network gateways, and even CDN nodes. China, France, Japan, and the US, as well as Brazil, top the list for the most affected countries. Successful exploitation of these shortcomings could permit an adversary to perform a susceptible system as one-way proxies, as well as conduct denial of service attacks. The adversaries that abuse these vulnerabilities can create one-way proxies, spoof IPv4 and 6 addresses. According to the CERT Coordination Center, and vulnerable system may allow access to an organization's private network. The vulnerabilities are rooted by the fact that the tunneling protocols like IP6, and GRE6 and 4 and 6 and 6 and 4 are mainly used to facilitate data transfers between two disconnected networks that don't authenticate or encrypt traffic without adequate IPS, Internet Protocol security. In the absence, it opens the door for these types of attacks. There's been multiple CVEs that have been launched for this, CVE 2024-75905 and 75906, and CVE 2025-23018 and 23019. So there's that. As for defenses, it's recommended to use IPsec or WireGuard to provide authentication and encryption, and only accept tunneling packets from trusted sources. Again, basic blocking and tackling, but you would be surprised how hard that is for some to implement. The FTC has taken action against GM and OnStar for unlawful collection and selling drivers' precise geolocation and driving behavior data from millions of vehicles. OnStar is supposed to save your life, but also tracks all of your information. So to know, in the case, all of that. And then GM found a way to monetize that data because marketers and companies want that data. And allegedly, they've been selling it without actually getting consent or letting people know how they're collecting the data and what they're doing with that collected data. That data was subsequently sold to third parties like consumer reporting agencies like Verisk and LexisNexis, and even Jacobs Engineering, whose reports influenced those drivers' insurance rates and even led to denial of coverage. FTC further notes that GM misled consumers by making OnStar's smart driver feature appear as a driving habit self-assessment tool rather than a data collection mechanism. The proposed order from the FTC settles GM and OnStar from engaging in similar practices for the next 5 years and introduces several additional provisions: a ban of sharing geolocation and driver behavior data with consumer reporting agencies, to obtain mandatory consumer consent before collecting or selling data, the deletion of priorly retained data unless consumers opt in, allow consumers an easy way to access and delete their data, and give consumers a simple method to disable in-vehicle tracking and driving data collection, improve transparency with clear disclosures, and limit data collection only what is necessary. You know what would solve this? A federal data bill, a federal data privacy bill would solve it in a minute. So we get to some geopolitical stuff here this morning, where the Philippines arrested several Chinese nationals suspected of spying on their critical infrastructure. The Philippines authorities arrested a Chinese national and 2 Filipino citizens suspected of conducting surveillance on critical infrastructure like military facilities. According to the National Bureau of Investigation in the Philippines, the suspects are believed to be connected to a China-linked network operating under the guise of autonomous vehicle developers that could face espionage charges for gathering and disseminating sensitive information related to national defense using advanced technologies. Again, this was part of the argument yesterday made by President Trump around illegal immigration into the country. We don't know who's in, and we don't know what they're doing, but they're potentially spying on our military bases or critical infrastructure. And as such, the Philippines was able to thwart off the attack. And you can take a look here of the equipment if you're watching. If you're listening, by the way, there's a trunk of a small SUV, looks like a RAV4, that has all kinds of spyware equipment in the back, including routers, data collection, a whole bunch of information, a whole bunch of tech in order to essentially spy on sensitive locations. Additionally, a Washington man has admitted in court to being involved in multiple fraud scheme, causing the losses of more than $600,000. Marco Raquan Honesty, that's a great name. That's the reason I picked the story, by the way, Honesty. His name's Honesty, and he's pled guilty to fraud. That throughout 2021 and 2022, he engaged in COVID relief, fraud, smishing scams, bank account takeover, forged money orders, and other fraud scheme. Honesty engaged in SMS phishing or smishing, targeting intended victims with text messages that alerted them of unauthorized transfers of their funds and directed them to a phishing website that spoofed a legitimate bank site to steal their information and then take over their accounts. Again, your bank account should be secured with multi-factor authentication. Say it with me. I may have to put together an MFA song for all of y'all. According to court documents, the defendant used the smishing victim's information to complete a purchase with the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles. As part of the scheme to defraud car dealerships, also created fake IDs to sell to other individuals targeting dealerships in similar schemes. Again, so he also did PPP fraud and so forth. He faces up to 20 years in prison for wire fraud and a mandatory 2-year sentence. He's scheduled for sentencing on May 23rd. So 4 more months for that. And a former analyst for the CIA pleads guilty to transmitting top secret national defense information to individuals who did not have the necessary authorization to receive it, and then attempted to cover up the activity. Asif William Rahman, 34, of Vienna, was an employee of the CIA since 2016, had a top secret security clearance and access to sensitive compartmentalized information. He was charged with 2 counts of unlawful transmitting NDI in November following his arrest. He has pleaded guilty to 2 counts of willful retention and transmission of classified information related to national defense. He's also expected to be sentenced in May. He faces up to 10 years in prison. How is this not treason? Still, mind boggles me. Rahman is said to have also shared an additional 10 documents classified at the top secret level in a similar manner that he transmitted the initial ones pertaining to United States ally and its planned kinetic action against a foreign adversary. So the names of the countries were not disclosed, but multiple reports from Axios and CNN revealed that this was the stuff that he shared were likely Israel's plans to attack Iran. And Rahman, a CIA official, and obviously we ought to be mindful of that as well. So there's that. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Until then, make sure to subscribe, follow, share, like, comment, and check out all of the latest and greatest on our website at cyberhubpodcast.com. Till then, have a great rest of your day, and most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.